Welcome, everyone. My name is Ramses Out. I run a little website called Rome Stack, which will soon be renamed to Think Stack. And the whole reason is that although I really love Rome, I believe in Rome as a primary tool for knowledge work and learning. I also believe that it's not just about the tool, it's more about the process, our workflows, how we approach things. So this session is about how to choose your next skill. So I've worked with almost, I would say over 100 professionals, done a lot of one-on-one coaching, help people set up their different note-taking tools, integrations with tools like Readwise. And I've noticed that in the end, it's not really about, like I said, not about the tool that we use, but what we're trying to solve. So one of my main interests and what I've seen among many knowledge workers is just a way to take in information and make it your own. So basically learning. We can talk a lot about second brains. We can use note-taking tools to feed our first brains. But the question really is, okay, but what am I going to learn? What am I going to spend my attention on? What I'm going to spend time on? What I'm going to take notes on? And then what am I actually going to make part of myself? So what am I going to turn into a skill? So if you have knowledge on one hand, which is all theoretical, which many of us knowledge workers work with every day, a lot of theoretical knowledge, then the question is, how can you make that a reality? So when we talk about learning, skill building, it's taking knowledge and practicing it in a way that it becomes a repeatable skill so that you don't have to go back to your note-taking system to figure out how to do something. So basically that is what I mean when I'm talking about building skills. So we'll walk through basically a few whys. So why become better at learning? So overall, then of that skill, because I believe that learning is a skill, why would you become better at picking new skills? So the sub-skill of learning how to learn is basically picking the right skill. And I will be teaching you a 5-part framework. Didn't completely invent it myself. I've used many ideas from the business world to identify basically what to focus on. I've read many articles about skill acquisition. I have my own experience as a teacher, and then also as a learner, because I like to call myself a professional learner, which means companies pay me or used to pay me, because now I'm an independent, to learn skills and to distill the most important parts and then teach others that distillation. So again, interrupt me if you have any questions, and otherwise just get started. And by the way, as you can see here, I have a few timers added. So again, keep your note-taking tool ready, because we'll be doing a few exercises. So you'll leave with basically a half-finished learning plan. So you can already start to dig a little bit deeper and really find the sub-skills that you will be working on. Maybe a fun exercise is to put in a chat if you want. It's always good to share. Put in a chat what skill you've already been thinking about. We'll start a little bit higher up, a little bit higher level with a vision, then identify the roles, then brainstorm the skills, but maybe you've already identified a skill that you want to work on. So put it in a chat. It's always good to connect with like-minded people. Maybe you find people who are working on the same skill. So first, a little bit of more talking from my side, answering the question, why become better at learning? So this is a question I've been thinking about a lot, because I used to work in, well, first as a teacher, and later I worked in HR. So if you work on human resources, there are all these projects you basically try to push on the rest of the company. So one of my worries was always, okay, how can I actually motivate people to learn? And I've noticed that although personally I love to just learn anything, just learning for the sake of learning, probably many of you are the same, but for the majority of people, there has to be a use case. So you really need to understand, why does it pay to learn something new? So when you're confronted with a problem and you learn to solve it, often you don't even notice that you're learning. But if you think about this more consciously, really think about, okay, what problem am I trying to solve? Um, and how would I solve it? That can save you a lot of time, which in turn can motivate you more. So if you're a knowledge worker, which I will assume most of you are, you will probably face information overwhelm. So the first point, that is mainly why most people come to this personal knowledge management ecosystem with techniques and courses and tools, because they face information overwhelm. And I know that is how I got into this whole note-taking adventure, I would say, because I entered a sales career not knowing anything about sales because I was a teacher before. And I had to consume a lot of information, try out different techniques. But then as I was on the phone, sometimes I would be on the phone with a prospective client for over an hour, and it was impossible for me to just keep everything in my memory, in my working memory. So I had to become better at taking notes. That's also how I really became a fan of this outline way of note taking. So that is basically one really good reason. Also, because so much of our work is now digital and technology moves so fast, just being able to learn very quickly, being able to utilize new technology, new tools, new techniques very quickly without having to spend like months on a course, that can be very beneficial as well. Because if you're a fast mover, obviously you can gain some leverage. Another reason to learn how to learn is, again, with the technology, you can basically learn how to make your life easier. So because so many things can be automated, or parts of your job can be automated, that is in itself a reason to learn. And to give you one example of, once I moved up in my sales career, became more and more technical, had to analyze more complex contracts. One thing that I automated was like the data cleanup of weekly reports that I had to run. So I was basically aggregating data from different systems, trying to jam it together first in Excel. And when I discovered the R programming language, that saved me a lot of time. So that was a skill I invested maybe 20 hours in, but that proved every week it would save me between 3 and 4 hours. So that adds up very quickly. And like I said before, if you know how to learn, it will become more fun. So what do I mean with that? I don't mean that learning becomes easier per se when you know how to learn, because you will all hit plateaus. You will always run into complex problems that you will be breaking your head on. But if you know that your process can be trusted, then you will just follow the process, and you will start to enjoy the process, because you know this will bring me success down the road. It's not in the scope of this session how you can motivate yourself, but these are some things that I think will probably motivate many of you, because I know it motivates me. Like keeping these things in mind when I'm learning new things. I'm challenged. I don't want to continue. I just remind myself, okay, but I become better when I learn, and my life will be easier. It will be more fun, more fulfilled. So always good to have these reasons in mind. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat or interrupt me. And otherwise, I will continue with my little rant before we get into the process. So why become better at this subskill of picking new skills? Well, first of all, you can only learn really one thing at a time. So even though one skill is often made up of different subskills, and you will be working on different little skills at the time, like overall, if you really want to learn efficiently, like as fast as possible, it's best to just focus on one subset. Doesn't have to be hundreds of hours. Often it's just enough to have, as Tim Ferriss would say, just 5 practice sessions in. So really make it as limited as possible, so that you don't keep going in all directions. Focus on one thing or one related set of things for at least 5 learning sessions. Or as Josh Waitzkin would say, actually, I'm now thinking if he said it anyway, it doesn't matter. or 20 hours, like the 20-hour rule, to really break into a skill. Obviously, you will not master a skill within 20 hours, but it's enough to break in a skill and already know something that can be of use. So focus on one thing at a time. But if you work on one thing, you cannot work on another. So that's why picking a skill is important. Effective learning only happens when you show up. So even though you don't have to show up for a very long period of time to break into a skill, can just be like a few weeks up to a month, you do need to keep showing up. So if you pick the wrong skill, which is not very useful for you in the moment, how will you show up? Like, unless you really use your willpower, it's better to use something that you can actually use in practice. Maybe I'm saying something very obvious, but I think it needs repeating. And also, learning the right skills at the right time can give you huge leverage. So again, this is a skill in itself, spotting what skill to work on next. But just think of the crypto entrepreneurs. If you learn Solidity, which is a programming language, if I'm not mistaken, for the Ethereum blockchain, you could be creating NFTs right now. And you, like, it's still not too late, but this is an example of where gaining a skill quickly and early can give you a lot of leverage and give you a lot of benefits. So this is why it really pays to identify the skills that you can work on right now. All right, so far my little rant. Are there any questions? Are there any things that any one of you thinks doesn't make sense? Or maybe you want to add a little bit? If there are none, let's move into the process. So on Friday, I sent out a newsletter with a link to a blog post about how to pick your next skill. If you're not a RoamSec member, I will basically give you everything that you need in here. And I just realized I forgot a little thing, but I will give it in a little bit. But basically, the process is as follows. You start with a high level vision, and we'll walk through this together in a bit. Then you will identify your roles that are connected to that vision. So maybe I should expand these. So the way this exercise works, you name up to 3 current or potential future roles that are in line with your vision. And then under each, you name your responsibilities for those roles. This is important because basically your responsibilities explain the wanted outcome of something. So that is where you will plug in your skills. So with these roles and responsibilities in mind, you will brainstorm useful skills. You just write down whatever comes to mind, and that would make you better at fulfilling your roles. Then finally, you map the skills to the roles. So I will show that in a little bit, how you do that in Roam. And then finally, there's the DIS framework, which is by Tim Ferriss. And that is basically, once you have identified, like, I would say preferably one skill, but if you've identified 1, 2, 3 skills, you will deconstruct them. So you really will drill down, what are the subskills? What are the highest leverage activities that I can do to already get results? And basically, this is also where you would focus the first 5 practice sessions on. This is where you would focus the first 20 hours on. So hopefully we can workshop this with one of you later today. But first, we'll start with a vision. And I have an example for everything. But basically, the first exercise, if you've ever done building a second brain, you've done this before to come to your 12 favorite problems. So this will probably be a familiar exercise, but just close your eyes and think where you will be 1, 5, and 10 years from now on, and make it as rich as possible. Think where, like, how do you want your externals to be, but also how do you want to be? Like, if you are very easily distracted. Maybe you want to work on better focus. And then you would brainstorm all these different things that are in line with better focus. Like in what roles could you show better focus, like as a worker, but maybe also as a parent, listening to your kids. Then the skills that would be in line with gaining focus could be meditation, breath work, anything. So that is basically how it all unfolds, but it starts with a vision. So my vision is a little bit abstract, but that's okay. In everything that I do, I aim to be my best self, which sounds a little bit vague, but that is okay. I work on self-actualization by helping others find what sparks joy and learn new skills. So basically, what I'm doing now, giving a workshop, this is basically my life's work. This is what I've been wanting to help people with for years, and I'm figuring it out now. So I want you to just spend 3 minutes, write whatever comes to mind, close your eyes first, make it the visualization easier, and I will tell you when the 3 minutes are up. So now that you have your vision clear, can be anything, can be as abstract as you want it to be. And I see Andy is sharing his, so I will read it out loud if you're okay with it, Andy. And then we'll go into the roles. I will share mine. So Andy says, I want to be a great parent and husband and leader of my business, guiding others to make the best of themselves, as well as for myself. I want to ultimately parlay that into the wider world in some way, which right now feels like a book or books. Yeah. So there are a few roles in there already, Andy. Very, very nice. And I would say it's a big vision, but if you think about many years, this is like something to make your life better. Like you want to be a great parent, a husband, a business leader, but also probably a thought leader. So there are a few roles already, I think, that are pretty clear. So this exercise, the next step is to look at what roles do you currently have. So maybe in your case, Andy, I know you run a business. So those would be a role that you already have. You're a husband and father that you already are. You're not yet a writer in the sense that you write books. I know you are a writer in the sense that you write blog posts, you write newsletters, you write on Twitter. So, but your vision is that you want to grow it bigger. So have a bigger audience where you reach people with your ideas. I have a little bit of a similar roles that I would say. So I see myself as a writer, teacher, and marketer. Probably I should mention something about my personal life, but I'm a workaholic and I don't have a family. So it's these are my professional roles, although I do find a lot of fulfillment in them. So I see myself as a writer, maybe semi-professionally. I see myself definitely as a teacher, and something I'm not yet, which should definitely become, is a marketer of myself, of my ideas, of my products, of anything. So that is basically where you will be spending the next 5 minutes. And then also, because just naming 3 roles will not take you a lot of time, but also think of some responsibilities that you have. So in the case of me, where I'm a writer, this is by no means complete, but my responsibilities are to research topics, manage my writing process, which is very big. I know it's a very big skill, like writing, but that's okay. Getting feedback, I think that is in itself a skill, you know, to ignore my ego and accept stuff that people suggest, and publish articles, which in itself, trust me, if you try to do it at skill, publishing and getting people, having people read your stuff, that is more difficult than it may look, or maybe I just make my life a little bit too difficult sometimes. Same for teacher, I have a few responsibilities, and same for marketer. Spend 5 minutes. I will probably be expending this a little bit for myself, I see right now. So I will be writing along. And we'll start the timer and talk to you in 5 minutes. So the next step is to brainstorm useful skills. So if once you have your roles identified, your responsibilities identified, you can start to think about, okay, what are different skills that I will need to be able to best tackle these responsibilities. So for example, researching topics, just top of my mind could be being able to Google effectively, like learn the different Google search commands, arguments. Maybe it means setting up some social listening bots, just naming something random, or it can just be plain old note taking, that you have no idea that what you actually read, you have no organization system, which will be a very big skill to tackle, but it is a skill. So managing my writing process, again, can be very, very big. But in a later stage, we'll dissect the skill and say, okay, what are the highest leverage knowledge blocks that you can focus on first? Getting and accepting feedback could be finding the right tool to get feedback and to have some kind of way to quickly process it. So in my case, I had to learn how to probably use Google Docs. But once I learned Google Docs, that was solved. Publishing articles can be, okay, find the publishing platform that takes least time and that gives me the biggest audience. That can be, for example, a Medium or a Quora. So this is basically how you start to identify skills. And a skill can also be a tool. So I already mentioned Medium, but then you would dive into, okay, what are the Medium best practices? How can I get my article noticed, et cetera, et cetera. These can be quite high level skills. No need to become go to the nitty gritty details, because that is what we'll be doing in the this part. So the dissecting a skill. And I encourage you to do this in Rome, because in a bit, I will show you how you can basically rank your skills and then find a skill to focus on first. And why would that be? Because the skill that will help you with most responsibilities is the highest leverage skill. Pretty easy if you ask me. Again, I will give you 5 minutes. I've written down 9, but feel free to go crazy. And I will start the timer. And if you have questions, just put them in a chat. I will answer them during these 5 minutes. So I hope you were able to brainstorm at least a handful of skills. Maybe you noticed that some skills apply to different roles. And Sam said that, or he asked, how would you approach discovering that the roles you had outlined are actually fairly different from each other? So Sam, I don't know if after this exercise, you still feel there's no overlap, like for every role you had completely different skills?
Yeah, Ramses. So, and just to sort of set the stage, my vision was being able to lead groups during live sessions to address complex issues. So essentially like helping drive the human side of collective intelligence. I work in consulting, so I do a lot of sort of facilitation work. And for the roles, I had listed first public speaker, second facilitator slash coach, and third visualizer. And so as I was building up the skills, I was finding that there was a pretty big distinction between the sort of human focused side of being a public speaker, things like speaking with confidence, understanding human motivation, facilitator, coach, very similar, lots of things like close and empathetic listening, human connections. But then the sort of visualization side being much more tech focused. So using data analysis and visualization tools, things like Tableau, Power BI, Mural. Again, I think that both of these skill sets are really important together, right? Like having the visualization and having the human behavior side. But as I lay them out, they are pretty distinct skill sets, at least as I've seen them laid out. So hopefully that context helps a little bit.
Yeah. So I was thinking visualization as drawing, but you mean more data visualization or process visualization using different whiteboarding tools, for example,
Yeah,
or data
exactly. I think
visualization tools.
Yeah, I think ideally being able to use some sort of like live feedback mechanism during facilitation sessions. So yeah.
Okay. So maybe my mind is very associative because I already see some skills that could help you overlap, but I'm going to keep quiet for now. What skills have you written down? If you want to share.
Yeah. So the skills that I've written down are body language. So both being able to be very deliberate with mine from a public speaking standpoint, but also being able to sort of read people and see like, are they engaged? Are they paying attention? Is what I'm saying registering? Listening and questioning. So almost like how, I don't know, people in like a therapist should be really good at listening to what people are saying and asking the right questions at the right times to guide their behavior. Um,
Yeah.
and then sort of data analysis and visualization, which I don't have a huge data background, so those may be a lot more similar than I realized. But again, using tools like Tableau or Power BI to sort of show data. And then a sort of third skill that I think ends up tying them together is the concept of storytelling. So not just like throwing data on a page and expecting people to figure out what it means, but being able to
Yeah.
sort of take data and information and make it human, and sort of being able to sort of pull these threads together to tell a story that people care about.
Yeah. I think that is a good skill to basically synthesize all these different roles. But you mentioned in your vision that you want to help. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Help people make complex decisions in a group. Was that your
Yeah,
vision? Yeah.
more of like I would say addressing complex issues, but I guess a big part of that is like what are the decisions that you're making. So I think you could probably summarize it as
Yeah.
making complex decisions. So sort of like leading people through algorithms for thought, even if they wouldn't label that as such.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Actually, like I said, I used to be a facilitator in companies, and I also worked a lot with data. So I've been more or less, I think, in your situation. Although I was never responsible for driving complex decision making. Um, I've been in a few instances, but I wouldn't say I was that professionally. But what this basically, like the association that triggers this in me would be, okay, you have storytelling, that's your overreaching skill. But how can you storytell? You can storytell by just talking, but you can also storytell by using visuals. And visualizing data makes storytelling way more easier. So you could combine that skill. You could combine public speaking with storytelling and back it up with your data analyst skills, your data visualization skills. As for the facilitation, that could plug in also again in your data visualization, because maybe you can create some forms, some frameworks that, or some tools that you can help people through, collect some data. So make it create a process that as you're talking through things, as you're making decisions, you quantify it and you plug it basically in a model. And then, and I've been in day-long facilitation sessions. You don't keep track of all the different decisions that are made or how they interact. But once you see it visualized, and we've done that, for example, for software selection projects, where we would score presentations by vendors and we would try out ourselves, and then we would aggregate all the data and then visualize it, and then we had basically had the decision made for us. So I'm spitballing now a little bit how I would do this, but I think there's definitely some overlap, maybe not at first sight, but as you start with data visualization tooling, and you start to think of where you can use it to improve your storytelling or to make the decision-making processes, you'll start to see many more applications of this one skill. And that's how you will find it. That's also why I think we should first look at the high-level skills, and then on a per need basis should drill down into the skill to make it smaller and to see, okay, how can I actually approach this data visualization skill from different areas. So use it in a talk you give, use it maybe as a facilitation tool, that you use some kind of visualization techniques to make ideas easier to understand. I don't know if it makes sense when I explain it in this little rant.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. I think sort of two takeaways that I have from what you're saying are, first, that it's really, really helpful to remember that skills are not a monolith. And so if I'm talking about data visualization, really what I want to think about is like, what are the data viz skills that fit into the role and vision, right? Like, I don't need to go learn every bit of data visualization. I need to learn the skills that help enhance my storytelling. And something else that kind of that I'm taking away from this is that there is actually a lot of value in identifying when those skills are different, because if you can find new and interesting ways to bring them together, you can drive more change than you could alone. It's like if I was just a data viz person or just a facilitator, those skills are helpful, but being able to sort of bring them together and tell a story is a lot more powerful and compelling than any one skill by itself. So maybe this is the kind of thing where like identifying that your skills or your roles are different can actually end up being a feature, not a bug, because you can find interesting ideas to combine together that maybe you otherwise would have said, like, I'm going to do 6 months doing data viz and then 6 months doing facilitation, and not connect them in a way that is actually much more interesting.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, it's you can accelerate your learning if you stack your skills. So if you say, well, I want to become better at data visualization, and you already identify all the little areas where you can already apply it, that in itself can give you so much practice, and then also spark new ideas where you can apply that skill. Same with public speaking. I know people who started out in Toastmasters just because they were so shy, and then once they discovered, oh, I feel pretty comfortable with more practice, then they started to take on maybe volunteering positions, and they started to teach people, and from that they rolled into new careers. So it can go all ways. I love to start with the visualization to find your vision, but as you start going, you will find new opportunities and maybe shift a little bit your direction and come to your vision like with a little bit roundabout way. But yeah, I always say learning is messy. You just need to get started, but it helps to have some kind of a plan and be aware of this relationship between different skills. So I if you have no more questions, and like, again, I hope this is clear. I want to show you a way how to prioritize what to focus on first. And I completely forgot to share this at the beginning, so I will do that right now. This is a visual that I created in Excalidraw. Basically, this is a framework that I'm taking you through now. Here's the example. Again, the vision, I have my 3 roles and my responsibilities, and then I started to brainstorm different skills. I like to do it this way because it's visual. To use this, click here in the top left corner, click on export, and then go to excalidraw.com and just open it, and then you're able to edit it. For now, I'm going to do it in Rome because I just realized you have the block reference counter. And if you block reference a skill and you plot it underneath a responsibility, then basically you will find what skill to focus on first. So what do I mean? So here I have my 9 or 8 example skills. And what I want you to do, if you've done this in Rome and otherwise use the Excalidraw canvas, is to map the skills onto the roles and responsibilities, or more specifically, the responsibilities. So in Rome, you hold the option, or I think it's the control key on Windows. On Mac, it's the option key. And I can just drag it underneath a responsibility. So for example, here, let's use note taking, research topics. Here you can see a little 1 appearing. So that's basically a counter which I will be able to use to determine, okay, what skills should I focus on first? If you don't see this little number, you need to turn on inline references. So you go to the menu, 3 dots here, you go to settings, and then you need to enable inline reference counts from the user tab. So once you have that enabled, you will be able to see the number of times you've referenced the block. So let me do a few so you get an idea of how this works. For example, here, note taking, I'll just go skill by skill and I will match it to the different responsibilities. So I would say copywriting, obviously there's a copywriting process and I need to become better at my writing. Copywriting also has to do with getting people to read my articles, you know, headlines. Let's see. I think copywriting also has to do with making complex topics simple to understand. Motivating, like I think copywriting is probably also motivating. Promote my content, definitely copywriting. Also to sell my courses. Okay. So already collected 6 points for copywriting. Let's see, I'll continue with note taking and then I'll start the timer. So note taking, obviously writing process. I would also say for getting and accepting feedback. Note taking, like when I'm talking to students, I need to note down their needs. I also need note taking to basically distill topics for myself. I would also say for creating learning materials, although obviously these are connected. Note taking also needed to understand audience needs, definitely to spot trends. And I think I would need to have some note taking to automate whatever I can. And why is whatever I cannot automate, I will outsource. So I need to have some standard operating procedures. As you can see here, already 9 points for note taking. So that is how you can use the inline block reference counter. I'm going to use, or I'm going to start the timer. If you use the Excalidraw 1, I have a distinction between hard links and soft links because obviously I don't match them to individual responsibilities, just to the role. So I give 1 point per dotted line and 2 points per solid line. But again, if you do this in Rome, it's easy breezy. So questions, please put it in the chat. I'm going to mute myself and start the timer. I'm going to cut this one a little bit short because I realize we're already at the top of the hour. Spent too much time talking, sorry. If you need some more time, return to your exercise or finish it quickly. For those who still have time, and if there's any one of you who really wants to drill down into this, which is a little bit more difficult, like generally for this exercise, you would need probably a few hours to do it well, but I will talk you a little bit through it. This is a framework that was developed by Tim Ferriss. So if you know Tim Ferriss, that the guy is obsessed with learning new skills, basically soaking up knowledge about everything and anything. And according to him, it took him about 20 years to find this, and it can apply to any skill. So even motor skills or just thinking skills, you can use this to deconstruct a high-level skill into smaller subskills, select the highest leverage subskills, sequence them in order of learning, and then to actually make sure that you show up, add some stakes to it. And that is also crucial. So if any one of you found a skill that they think, wow, I have no idea how to tackle this, Ramses, please help me, speak up and we can run through it. For sake of time, we'll only pick one. If there's no one, I will just spend a few more minutes to give you some advice on how you can actually find the answers to these questions. All right, so I'm going to leave you with just some advice on how to tackle this framework. Hopefully by now you have identified one top skill that has the most page references, or sorry, block references, that there's a clear winner. And maybe you already know something about that skill. Maybe it's a completely new skill. So for example, if you can look at this brainstorming session that I did, for me, storytelling was the #1 skill that jumped out. I know very little about storytelling. Like, I love stories. I know, the hero's journey. I've read the Hero with 1,000 Faces, but I'm still not really proficient in storytelling. So where would I go, not knowing anything about really how to tackle storytelling, and having to deconstruct this skill first? So asking myself, what are the minimal learnable units, the Lego blocks I should start with? I have no idea. Yeah, maybe stories, delivery, tone, maybe those are some sub skills I can brainstorm. So how you go over deconstructing a skill, I always encourage people to look for online communities where learners of the skill come together. Reddit is a really good forum, because it's very likely you will have some kind of subreddit. One example where I learned shorthand. So if you know the little scribbles that people used to use before we had recording devices and transcription devices, people would take notes by shorthand. So you can basically write at the speed of speaking. And I learned it from a subreddit r/shorthand, where I found manuals, and I found basically drills to help people get started with specific shorthand alphabets. So I was already presented with a curriculum with the basic learning blocks, starting from individual sounds, working up to most common words, doing drills. So just finding that one subreddit basically presented me with answers to all these questions, maybe except for stakes, because stakes is very personal. Deconstruction, you can also do just by doing, so instead of just going on subreddits, go to Google. You will likely find forums, you will find probably articles, maybe some videos. So this is just following your curiosity, but asking yourself, okay, what are the core atomic building blocks to get started with this skill? And maybe it's very counterintuitive. So if you really want to become good at chess fast, and now I'm thinking of just Wittgen again, he started at the beginning. So he started with the end moves and instead of with the opening moves. So he was practicing end game in chess before starting basically opening. And that helped him accelerate very quickly, because if he would get stuck in a game, at least he had his knowledge of the end game scenarios. Then once you have clear, okay, these are the foundational parts, you see it repeated over and over again in articles and books and videos, wherever you find the minimal learnable units, then it's time to focus on, okay, what set of skills, sub skills can I use to already get stuff done? So if you're into data visualization, instead of doing a complete course for beginners where you start with statistics at the beginning, and before you get 5 modules later, you get into data visualization, maybe you want to start at data visualization and work your way back to a point where you think, okay, this is where I can get in. So you can find the 20% that give you the highest leverage. So be good for yourself on your time. Don't learn something just because it's in a curriculum. And then sequencing is very difficult. Like, selection can already be very difficult, but you can basically do pattern recognition by exposing yourself to a lot of materials. But sequencing, I would recommend often to either work with a coach or maybe have some kind of mentor, or at least ask an expert. So maybe you can already tell someone who, someone who already gained the skill that you want to master. You can tell them a little bit about what you already understand, what you've already tried, maybe some stuff that you're stuck with, and someone can tell you, oh, but you're stuck with this concept because you don't understand some other foundational concept yet. Maybe you need to go a little bit back, figure out that foundation, and then come back to this skill. So maybe if you have no idea how to clean data and you want to do data visualization, well, first you need to have some clean data. So maybe you need to go back and get some basics on cleaning and preparing data. And then finally, stakes. What are the real life consequences of you not mastering this skill or skill set? So I always like to the analogy of a diet. Like if you do a diet just because you want to lose some weight, but there's no real consequence, then you're less likely to do it. When I heard from my doctor, Ramses, if you're not going to stop eating sugar and other crap, you're going to die of diabetes one day. That motivated me. Same way, I had to get some certification for my job. That motivated me. That can completely go into the other direction as well, because I think many of you have some traumas from high school where you failed tests, or maybe college where you were just so stressed out because you were not sure if you were going to make it. There's a fine balance, but look for stakes, look for positive stakes. So when you achieve a skill, how will that enrich your life? On the other hand, if you don't achieve a skill, what will your life look like? For example, it would be, I'm not able to achieve my vision. My vision is personally, I want to help people feel fulfilled, spark joy in other people. But if I don't write, if I don't teach, if I don't find a way that people actually going to find my stuff, I'm never going to fulfill my vision and not going to find the fulfillment that I'm looking for. So that is for this. And I see a question in the chat. So CK asks, finding the right community I found to be the best hack for skill learning. Great to hear that it resonates with you. And the question is, could you say more about finding the right peer group you use? Yeah, I think that is a good question. And if you ask me, I think you should be very active in the community. So one way I got into personal knowledge management was by turning the notes from the courses that I took into Twitter threads. So I was basically sharing what I knew. And then sometimes, or often and increasingly, I would ask questions. So I would say, hey, I want to achieve this, but I have no idea how to do it. And because people were already following me, they would probably, they would point me in the direction of resources, or they would help me directly. I've even had people DM me, say, hey, we have this private Discord server where we come together and we help people onboard, in this case, Obsidian, and you say this is your use case and you can never figure it out how to do it. Well, we already have 3 people in the community who have had similar use cases. Would you like to join us and learn with us? I've had those DMs. So I would say be very vocal about what you want to learn and share what you learn, because if you share what you learn, you'll attract people who are learning the same stuff. And maybe in some ways they're already ahead of you. And I've seen with people who are complete newbies and I felt like the expert, they're running circles around me in that skill 1 year later. So they were newcomers. I felt like the expert. I was sharing everything I knew about personal knowledge management. And now they're teaching me, or they are helping me out because they are building plugins, or they are creating automations with Zapier. So that is how I found my community in the case of personal knowledge management. In the case of language learning, which was also a very important skill for me to learn, I I was hanging out in language forums, and I was testing out different techniques from people, and I would write reports basically on how well they helped for me. So doing that will really put yourself in the spotlight, and people will appreciate it, and they will offer their help whenever they can. So I hope that makes sense. So yeah, learn in public as a way to attract like-minded people. Absolutely. And I think it's a win-win situation, because you maybe even a win-win-win, because you get to find like-minded people, other people get to learn, but you, as you are teaching what you've already learned, you're already processing that stuff more deeply, because you're trying to explain it in simple terms. And being able to explain a tricky concept in simple terms is basically a mark of you understanding it. So I hope that makes sense. I went over time, sorry, but thank you for sticking around, everyone. I will stick around for just a few more minutes in case you have questions or comments. Again, thank you. This will be part of a course I am working on. So if you're a Roam Stack member already, you will have access to all the materials I'm creating about this. I will have more of these workshops in the future. Not sure yet what I am going to do next week. I had an idea, but I'm blanking on it. But it's all in line the coming weeks and months. Everything that I'm focusing on is leveraging all these note-taking tools, all these flashcard tools, communities, learning in public, to help you decide, okay, what skill am I going to work on? How am I actually going to approach this? How am I going to select materials? How am I going to plan my study sessions? How will I focus in my study sessions? How will I take notes? How will I create flashcards, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're interested in that, definitely sign up at roamstack.com for the free newsletter and stay up to date with anything that I'm producing surrounding this topic. Sam, we'll get to see the infamous workflow to define workflows. Still figuring it out. Although I think this is basically what I'm working on now with this learning workflow, is basically like figuring out your workflow for learning. Because although I think there are some concepts that are just valid for everyone, so things like spaced repetition, active practice, trying to solve a problem without having all the answers yet, so using the generation effect, there are a few psychological effects that you can leverage, but then basically finding the approach and finding your sequence. Yeah, I think that hopefully it's a precursor to expand that a little bit broader, not just stick to learning new skills, but actually how do you solve problems. So I will definitely dive into different content materials, so content formats. So how would you handle video content and audio content and written content, et cetera, et cetera. And these all require different workflows. So hopefully this will help me to get closer to the workflow to define workflows. It's a difficult project for me, because I'm looking for patterns, see, okay, where can I strip away everything from this workflow to define workflows? But it's a lot of coaching I'm still going through. CK asks, at what point did you change your identity from student to teacher? How did you make that shift? I have the privilege that I studied in an applied, in a university for applied sciences. So it's quite a unique concept. I don't know if it's unique to the Netherlands, but I haven't heard it like in the United States. What it basically is a normal university, but in like the second half of your first year, you will start to do internships. So in my case, I was pursuing a degree in education. I wanted to teach Spanish. So after about half a year, I would sit in with another teacher. I would basically still listen. And then from year 2, I would give individual classes or give parts of classes of the person I was doing the internship with. So I became a teacher very early in more professional sense. I think you should become a teacher in a self-learning sense as soon as possible, because you need to put yourself in situations where you get to distill the concept. So even when I take notes, I'm basically teaching my future self, because I'm not assuming that I will understand some rambling explanation. I really need to get to the core as quickly as possible when I'm taking notes. So even then, I'm taking the role of a teacher. I think that the healthy thing is, like, it's again always a balance. So you learn something, you take some notes, then you take your notes to write maybe a Twitter thread, and then you've already basically gone from learner to teacher. And then you learn something new, you go back to the learner role again, you take notes for yourself, you simplify your notes, you become the teacher again. So I think it's a little bit philosophical maybe, but I think that is how you could look at it. So you don't have to be a teacher in a professional sense. You don't have to do an internship. Although the way I did my internships did make it that it became like second nature for me. And to continue, like, to finish my little rant, I would even think that when you explain a concept, even when you're in high school or in college, and you explain a concept to a fellow student, you are being a teacher. Even though you've just learned the concept, if it clicks immediately for you, and you've checked that your understanding is correct, and then someone else asks you immediately after to explain the concept to them, then you're already a teacher. So it doesn't have to be as loaded. All right, good questions. CK, you were fortunate, so that makes you transition to internet teacher easier. You would think, but I struggle immensely with curriculum design. Like, I was a language teacher, so we had a textbook, and basically language, you have the grammar from simple to complex. So I basically had the curriculum laid out for me. Once I got into corporate environments where I had to design my own trainings, that was already challenging. But now that I'm designing a course that will be like 4 or 5 modules, yeah, I'm shitting my pants because I'm really struggling with it. So it's always a struggle. But what helps is to just go and ship. And that's why I do these sessions. This is basically me learning in public, because this is the first time I'm delivering this workshop that I will deliver in, like, officially in January for my course. So I will probably do this workshop again in December, again for free, and then it will be part of the course. So this is me learning in public, hearing from you what you struggle with, some questions, so that will help me to also make these materials better. All right, still 11 people, my goodness. You must like me rambling about this stuff. If there are no more questions, I'm going to close the call. Wish you a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye all.